Call of Duty Zombies is one of the biggest franchises in the world. Call of Duty has been around for years on end and still has games in active development. These games revolve around being part of the military, doing several missions in different eras of war. This includes World War II, the Cold War, and even wars set in the future. These games have single-player campaigns, multiplayer lobbies where people can practice their skills against other players, and different types of game modes, most notably Nazi Zombies. Zombies was a simple game mode that had a very straightforward concept: survive oncoming waves of zombies. Now, it has become one of the most complex stories that I've ever seen, spawning multiple timelines, creating some confusion for casual players. I understand the developers trying to create something new and pushing their own limits, but at the same time, there is a limit that should not be crossed. Call of Duty Zombies has a convoluted story mode that is so far gone that we need to come back and tone down the series. Let's start off by describing how to play the game to understand it. The basics of each zombie's experience is quite simple. This is a round-based game, so a specific number of zombies come at the beginning of each round. Every map has barriers that zombies come through. You can board them up if you wish, or let them come through. Killing zombies get you points that you can later spend on various things. You also need to manage what doors you buy to get through the map quickly. The farther you go onto the map, the more expensive these doors get. You also need to upgrade your arsenal by getting guns either from buying from the wall or getting it from a mystery box. The mystery box also contains wonder weapons, which are better than regular weapons. You can also upgrade your weapons by putting them in the pack-a-punch machine. This is still not enough to survive. The perks are the key to survival. Providing things like double health, double damage, and a third weapon will help the player progress through rounds. These factors are what keep you alive. Another disclaimer, this video will talk about some maps from games like World at War, Black Ops 1, Black Ops 2, and Black Ops 3. Specifically, I want to talk about the main four characters: Richtofen, Takio, Dempsey, and Nikolai. So maps like Die Rise, Transit, Call of the Dead, Buried, Mob of the Dead, and Shadows of Evil will not be talked about much because of wanting to stick to the original four characters. Number 1. Characters. By looking at the characters and how they changed throughout the series, we will see how it has become more convoluted than ever. It all started with Call of Duty World at War, where we first saw our characters on the map Nocturne. Let's start off with the fact that our characters are big stereotypes of what they are. Dempsey being the American meathead who says "oorah" too many times. Nikolai, the Russian drunk who talks about his multiple wives. Takio, the Japanese samurai that is the group punching bag. And finally, Richtofen, the Nazi scientist who is our main character behind most of the chicanery that happened in the zombies timeline. Starting off with Dempsey, we will see what type of character he is and how his character has changed throughout the years. He starts off with being very gruesome and having a very sadistic humor.
Slice and dice, baby!
He loves killing zombies for the sake of the kill. He is also very crude with his humor and is not afraid to show it whatsoever.
With a Marine! Eat it, freak bags!
It is almost immature in a way. Now looking at the younger Dempsey, they changed his character up. The excuse could be that he is younger and getting accustomed to everything. The problem with this though, is that since he's more serious, it ruins his character and it is hard to see his progression throughout the series.
Target area appears affected by an unknown contaminant. Enemy personnel have degenerated to their primal instincts, exhibiting irrational and unparalleled savagery.
The idea of having younger characters was implemented in Black Ops 2 Zombies, specifically the Origins map. With this decision, it took too many steps backwards since this was the benchmark for maps to come. Moving on to Nikolai. He's a very entertaining character that brought a lot to the story and humor.
Dempsey, I think you left your blush!
He would constantly talk about how he would have multiple wives, or talk about women in general.
What? That stripper must have stolen my money!
He would mention that he is drunk almost all the time, and he would just have very crude humor overall.
Running low on ammo! I'm drunk!
Bringing some enjoyment and comedy for the players. Like Dempsey, they toned down this character a whole lot. They made him more of a relatable character. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing.
I went to theater as a child. Once. It was like entering another world.
but he only talks about his one wife, and there's not much else about other women or drinking at all whatsoever. So this kind of ruins his character. He was very toned down and tamed, and not as likable as his drunk counterpart. Takio is an example of a character that was a little toned down, but not much at all because of how unliked he is. He is a very honorable man.
Today, I will send them back to their ancestors.
He kills because he has to, not because he wants to, and he takes the emotional toll of everybody else around him.
I hate you, Takeo.
Everyone hates him, but that is his character. Takio, like the others, is very toned down, and with his younger self, he doesn't talk all that much really, or if he does, it is not noticeable whatsoever.
Today, the demons will fall until they can fall no more.
Finally, Richtofen is the character with the biggest impact in the zombie storyline. He's the crazy one, the unhinged one.
Usually the voices sound so angry.
The one that does all the plans without thinking twice. To be honest, he is one of the only characters that doesn't change all that much. He's maybe a little toned down with the craziness, but overall, he is always the same Richtofen. This is the only excusable one because through his research, he developed into craziness. But as mentioned with Dempsey, it would have been better to start with his younger self than finish the story with it, having a natural progression to all these characters. Overall, the characters are well written when they first came out, but they have become more convoluted as time went on. The older characters left a bigger impact than the younger ones. This is due to how they told the story and when the maps came out. It becomes complicated for the average viewer since they have to keep up with all the characters and when the maps take place chronologically. Therefore, the developers should have either started with the younger characters or keep the older characters and not confuse people. Number 2. Level design. By looking at the level design, we can see how the game developers have jumped the shark and have become over the top with their designs. The point of level design is for the player to look at environments and aspects of the map to create their own stories and identities. It is important for a game to have good level design because it helps with immersion and realism. With the older maps, it tends to do this quite well. With the newer ones, it just doesn't work as well. This is all mentioned in a study from Jesper Carlson and Simon Safmalm titled Indexical Storytelling, a story without words. So with this in mind, let's see the level design of some maps to see if they are correct. The simplest and first map to be introduced into Nazi Zombies is Nacht on Toten. Nacht is an interesting map, simply because it is one of the first to come out and the most boring one to date. It is simple and tells the story like it is told. You're trapped in a bunker, and you must survive with the resources that you have. You can see all the things knocked over, the bookcases, the shelves. Even outside, it is a war zone and looks abandoned. This is classic Zombies. This is what a survival game mode should look like. The reason why this map works for storytelling is because of how simple it is and the fact that more is less. It is simple, yet effective. I could not make the same case for Zetsubo no Shima, which takes place in Call of Duty Black Ops 3 and was the third map to come out. Zetsubo is quite a complex map with how it is laid out. It is complex because of the implementation of the water and power systems. The fact that you had to use water to power up generators complicates things, especially since they were time-based. This is one of the more complicated ways to turn on something simple like power. There are also 3 different types of water: green, blue, and purple. The difference between the water? When you feed it to the plant, each one gives you a different reward, and if you mix them, it gives you even better gear. This map confuses me every time I play it. It takes a lot to get used to all the challenges, water types, locations for all the parts, etc. To this day, I do not know how to turn on the Pack-a-Punch because of how everything is laid out. This map needs a guide to understand how to play it, which is quite unfortunate. It is especially confusing how big it is, and it being in a jungle/swamp, you have a harder time trying to navigate yourself through this thing. The thing that I can compliment about it is that it's visually nice and it makes you feel like you're in a war zone when all the planes fly over you, but other than that, the level design is quite lousy. This is a prime example on how zombies have become convoluted. They focus too much on making new features to try to wow the player, rather than keeping us in the survival mode and trying to survive in the swamp. They did have a swamp map, Shinonuma, but they tried going bigger with this one. and it ultimately failed. This is apparent when you see the boss being a swamp monster. It takes the player out of it. Instead of focusing on the map design, storytelling, and zombies, which is the main focus in this game mode, they tend to focus on an overbloated map with new features to try to conclude the zombie story, which didn't work. It just tend to confuse the players more than help them. A great map that tells a great story through level design is from the original Call of Duty World at War, and this map is known as Der Riese, the fourth and final map of World at War. It ties a lot together on how the game was made to be. It was the introduction to the teleporter. Why is this so important to the storyline? It's because it is the cause of why things are so complicated in this storyline. It introduced time travel. This implementation was fine in the early stages of Zombies because the time travel was not really implemented or used at the time, but with more games, it progressively got more complicated with more time travel and more time frames and more timelines. This created so much confusion with the zombie storyline. It shows, since there are two versions of this map, the World at War version, Der Riese, with the older crew, and then the Black Ops 3 version with the younger crew, the Giant. Der Riese is the centerpiece of the story since a lot of big changes happen here. It is the first map to introduce the pack-a-punch machine as well. The way that they displayed and laid out this map is great and adds a lot to the story. It shows that there was a lot of testing here on the zombies themselves. By looking at the vials, the lab equipment, even the clock that barely ticks, it makes it seem like time has stopped here. Not only because they're getting attacked by a horde of zombies, but because they're using time travel and complicating the plot, putting time to a halt. With this map being the centerpiece for all maps to come, this was a master at storytelling and set the bar. Compare this map to something like Revelations. Revelations is a mess. It is all over the place. The concept to this map is that it is the culmination of all the zombies' experiences by having some of the previous maps on this one, including Verrock Kino der Toten, Der Eisendrache, Mob of the Dead, Shangri-La, and Nacht der Untoten being the centerpiece of everything. You can tell this map is a blob of everything together because one map leads to another, which then leads to another, then you go on a jump pad which leads to another, and then to another, and then you go through a portal that leads to another, and then you can go to 4 different portals that lead to another, and then you're all together all at once, jumping on jump pads, going to different ones. It was a mess. As you hear me say this, it shows the atrocity of the map layout and the level design of this map. It also shows a lot of this blue goo and rocks that try to connect it all together. I know it's weird when I say it, but blue connects everything. The only 3 areas that are original in this map are the spawn room, the pack-a-punch area, and the apothecan's stomach, and the boss room. When thinking of the last Zombies map to come out at the time, you would think that they would go all out and pick a map like the previous installments. A map that would push boundaries and try something completely different to try to wow the audiences. Maps like Der Riese, Moon, and Origins are the last maps of each, and seeing this one sit with all the others, it is apparent that it is the weakest link because of the fact that it didn't introduce anything new to the map design, and especially since it confuses more people than not with the story, making the map a disappointment. Number 3. Easter eggs. Finally, let's talk about one of the biggest implementations of Zombies, and probably the most notable, the Easter egg. The first Easter egg to be introduced into Zombies was in the map Ascension in Call of Duty Black Ops 1. It was fairly simple and straightforward, the only requirement being it needed to have 4 players present. Even though there were some Easter eggs in Black Ops 1, the one that I want to talk about specifically is Moon. It is my favorite Easter egg and the one that changed Zombies forever. It starts off in Area 51, which works quite differently because it is not the classic round-based gameplay. Zombies keep spawning and get more powerful over time rather than getting more powerful with the number of rounds that increase. It is like an endurance run to test your skill. You can leave at any point to go to the real part of the map, which is a Nazi moon base overrun by zombies. The one tricky part of this is that you need to have all the wonder weapons of the map. And you have to have one of the excavators land in a very specific place of the map, which is completely randomized, making this very difficult unless you get perfect luck. Getting past that, you can do the Easter egg with ease. It involves playing a memory game, following a ball, doing a defuse game, getting objects, talking to a girl named Samantha, filling up souls boxes, and playing the memory game once again. I like it so much because at some point you get controlled by this little girl and the whole Easter egg is surrounded by doing tasks for her. Each step feels like a child's game. Simon says, catch, kick the ball, tag, etc. Finally, this is such an impactful moment in Zombies because of the end result. Samantha's games resulted into shooting missiles and blowing up the earth, changing the game forever. This is a master of storytelling because of the impact it had on the game and the new mechanics that it brought to the table. This map went down in history for being innovative and most of all, fun. Moving on to something like Gorod Krovi. This is where things get over the top insane. This is by far the most challenging Easter egg due to the extremely demanding steps. This step requires you to turn on the Pack-a-Punch, go through an endurance round of zombies to get to the Dragon Strike, get the Dragon Strike, get the Dragon Egg, charge the Dragon Egg, incubate the egg, get the Metal Fist, play with valves which is impossible without help, get the trophies, do a series of challenges, you got 6 of them, and then finally, kill Nikolai. I wanted to get footage of this map, of these specific steps, but messed up halfway with the bomb step because I personally tend to mess it up a lot due to incompetence. The steps in this feel like a chore to do and overly complicated. Look at the valve step, for example. It reminded me of the map Call of the Dead. There is a specific step in Call of the Dead where you must use algebra to put the dials in a very specific spot in order to complete a step. There's a whole article by Heidi Holsizer that explains how to do the step and what type of equations you must use since there's algebra included. You know it's a bad idea when you need to use algebra to do a step and a scholar has to do an article surrounding it. It is similar here because you need to have all the valves at specific numbers to do this step. It is common for people to look up solutions on the internet to find out what to do. I personally use this website, which helps, or you can use an Excel sheet someone made. But this goes to show that complicated things and trying to do quantity over quality just does not work. Comparing this to Moon, you can tell the difference between challenging and unfair. Moon is challenging. It can be unfair to have it based on luck, but after that, it is fair and fun for the player. Every step in Gorod Krovi felt like a chore and was extremely difficult to do, especially with more players. The one time I was actually able to complete the Easter egg was with one other player because of how much time there is with the bomb step. You get more time as there are less players. Now looking at the map that is the fairest and most fulfilling to play is Origins. Origins is a great Easter egg because of the balance of challenging and rewarding. Look at Moon. You must get all the wonder weapons in this map, but you have to get them out of the mystery box. But for this, you must go out and find the pieces individually and build them yourselves. You have to do 4 staffs, by the way. You must also fully upgrade them. After, put the staffs in specific locations in the robots. After that, you press the red button, you get the G strikes and use them in a specific spot. You shoot some things in zombie blood mode, get the thunder fists and upgrade them, and then finally go back to the crazy place and send the Maxis drone in the air, completing the Easter egg. Not much challenge, but it is still fair. The thing that does take a lot of time though is upgrading and getting all the staff parts. After that, you get a cutscene of Samantha playing with the dolls that are actually the playable characters, implementing that this is all a game played by Samantha. This is where the game peaked in storytelling and greatness. Forgetting the fact that they used the younger characters for this map, we've discussed that already. Making this take place in World War I with also having a captivating Easter egg that is fun to play, this is where it's at. The developers were able to find a balance between gameplay and storytelling, making this map one of the best. Now finally, going back to Revelations. This Easter egg is completely ridiculous and over the top. Personally, on a side note, this took me a full weekend to try to complete alone. It isn't as hard as Gorod Krovi, but it is still a chore to do some steps. Here are the steps. Shoot the gravestones in a certain order. Override the engines. Get all the altar pieces and build it. Get the wonder weapon, the Apothicon Servant, and upgrade it by shooting specific rocks in the sky. Collect the film reels. There are 3 of them, and you have to do a step for each of them. One of them, you have to activate the altar and find a specific rock for the altar man to change. I don't know how else to explain it, but he has to like do like a weird thing. And then he gets the item and it becomes a film reel. The second one, you have to throw little squids in a jar, and you have to throw them in very specific holes in the humongous apothecon. And the thing is, you only have 3. You have to fill 9 holes. It is impossible. Collect the skeleton parts by shooting them with the apothecon servant, and then you place them all in Noct. Then after, you use the beams to shoot more rocks in the sky. Then you teleport to Samantha's room. Then you have to find some eggs, and then hatch them. And then after, you have to find the summoning signs. Then you have to play Simon Says in the boss room. Then you have to go through the endurance run of the boss room. Then you gotta play basketball with the summoning key. And finally, fight the Shadow Man as the final boss. Like I said before, not as hard, other than the fact you need to do 2 boss fights. But the fact is, there are too many steps, and it could be complicated for the average user. It is also disappointing because the boss fight at the end is not original whatsoever. He's the same boss fight as the Shadows of Evil boss fight. Come to think of it, this whole map is not original at all. Not only is this map a mashup of all the maps together, but half the steps are not even original whatsoever. Look at these steps. Look at all these things. The Apothecon Servant is from Shadows of Evil. Samantha's room is from Kino der Toten. The egg is from Gorad Krovi. Simon Says is from Moon. And the Shadow Man's from Shadows of Evil. Looking at all this together, the problem with this map is the lack of originality. And I find that a big no-no since this is the final map of the zombie storyline. And this is strictly looking at the Easter egg steps and the level design alone. The storytelling behind it all is really complicated because from what I understand, the final cutscene explains the crew goes back in time to start a brand new cycle of them constantly fighting zombies and against the Apothecon army. Sometimes I don't even understand what I say. This is where all the maps decide to get really confusing with the third game, because all the maps are basically the same. Gorad Krovi, Revelations, Zetsubu no Shima, and Der Eisendrache. I didn't mention Der Eisendrache in this video, simply because it was actually probably the simplest one of them all, and one of the best ones of the 4, simply because it takes place in a castle in Australia, which is quite fun. Only real complicated thing was upgrading all the 4 wonder weapons, aka the bows, but it is fairly simple once you know what you're doing. It is pretty much similar to Origins. The big problem with Call of Duty Zombies nowadays is the fact that it does not focus on the horror elements or the zombies as much as it used to. It rather focuses on creating Easter eggs in order for the player to feel like they are doing something. For example, there is a book chapter labeled Dead Rising and the Game World Zombie in a book called The Playful Undead in Video Games by Christine Jorgensen. They talk about the problem with horror in video games and the fact that having zombies in the game, they rather focus on the gameplay aspects of the zombie rather than the horror, trying to create more action rather than scares. This is apparent in the newer games, especially since the first game took place during World War II and tend to have more scarier maps and new environments. With the newer maps though, they tend to go all over the place and focus more on creativity rather than realism. Point of the matter is that the series got more complicated as time went on. Moon was simple yet effective and probably the biggest map to come out at the time. Origins, a step in the right direction, which was even a better map compared to Moon, and it saved Black Ops 2 because of the previous disappointing installments. Then Black Ops 3 rolls around. It just came around and complicated things, making it nearly impossible to follow the storyline at this point with the introduction of time travel. The crazy part is that there's a 4th installment to this, making it even more complicated and giving the whole thing a true ending in Tag der Toten, bringing you back to the lighthouse in Call of the Dead and the story coming to a close. But I decided not to play it simply because before doing this essay, I only played a handful of times, and I couldn't understand the map, nor did I really understand the story. How does this all relate to the course? Zombies became such a popular thing in media and pop culture that it created its own genre. Movies, TV shows, books, and even video games all cashed in on the idea that zombies is a great way to tell a story. With Call of Duty in mind, I can give them props for doing something different at the time, but making it too overcomplicated as time went on. Also, the community part of the class relates to this because a very specific community loves to stay with this genre because of the comfort of it and fun potential that it has. Overall, Call of Duty Nazi Zombies goes down in history as being a great game mode, even one of the best of its kind. It has great quality put into it and a lot of care by the developers. Personally, I played a lot of Call of Duty Zombies because it is fun and addicting. I might bust its chops a little bit for having such an unforgiving storyline, but I will still love it to the end of time.